The 3:30 p.m. meeting of the Bakersfield City Council is now in session.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to call to order the 3:30 City Council meeting of August 12th, 2020. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Parlier. Vice Mayor Parlier. Councilmember Rivera.
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Weir.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
I am here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Thanks. On March 4th, Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency in California due to the threat of COVID-19. The governor also passed several executive orders, including the suspension of some components of the Brown Act related to public meetings such as this. And as such, the council members that you heard on the phone, Rivera and Weir, will be participating through alternate communication, and all votes tonight will be conducted by roll call. Due to the governor's order, which waived the Brown Act provisions requiring the physical presence of the public in light of the pandemic, public comments have been encouraged to be made by email and phone call to the city clerk, and we appreciate all those who have done that. Those received in such manner have already been provided to the council. So we'll receive public comments on the workshop items after the staff presentation on each of those items. And if there's anyone here who would like to make a public statement not related to the workshop matter, now would be the time. So Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak on a non-workshop item? We have none, and so Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under workshops, we have urban hens.
Thank you. Mr. Clegg.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'll turn the time over to Mr. Christopher Boyle.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Go. Council members, your first public workshop tonight at 3:30 is a presentation on the ownership of chickens in urban residential zones. In support of your workshop, you've also received as part of a packet an administrative report. A follow-up to that, attachments as it relates to ordinances from comparable cities, a fairly large volume of public comments that have been received in advance of today, in advance of release of the staff report. And then you also received a blue memo today in support of correspondence we received up until 1 o'clock today, as well as a proposed ordinance from the proponent that's also available on their website. So these are all supporting materials that have been provided in advance of the workshop. So let's step into the workshop. Urban hens, or chickens, have been addressed within our ordinance since 1918, where in 1918 an ordinance prohibited chickens unless they were kept securely enclosed in a yard or pen at all times. In 2011, the ordinance was amended to allow chickens in agricultural and agricultural type residential zones, and we'll talk at length about what those provisions are. The council is not adverse to the discussion on urban hens, because in the past, in 2013 and 2012, there was some dialogue that was referred to the council by committee, wherein in the end, the council chose not to take any formative action in amending the ordinance to allow chickens beyond what was already provided for. Therefore, the current ordinance allows for the breeding, hatching, raising of poultry and fowl in 3 zones: in the A zone, the agricultural zone, in the RH residential holding zone, and the RS residential suburban zone. In the residential suburban zone, there is a 24,000 square foot minimum lot size. There are also specific development standards or limitations placed on the use in the RS zone, as well as the other zones. That would be that they would be kept in an enclosed yard or pen at all times. And there are specific setbacks applied to the zone as well, where there is a 100-foot setback from the front lot line, as well as a 50-foot setback from residences in the RS zone. What does that provision look like on a map? Well, on a map, looking at this particular map, I've broken down the 3 zones into 2 distinct segments. The light green component is the A and RH residential holding zone districts. Now, if we take a closer look at those lands, we're looking at our wastewater treatment plants, both in the southwest and on the east sides of the city, our spread fields. The properties in the northeast portion, those are residential holding zones, and typically there isn't any residential activity occurring in those zones. So, in the interest of full disclosure, the dark green segments of parcels within the city, those are the areas that currently provide for residential urban hens as a use. I'll go one step further, though. There are a couple of caveats. In the upper northeast corner, there's a circular green area, dark green area. That's actually the setback area for the landfill. That reduces the amount of actual parcel area that's used for, that has a permission for chickens, down to a distinctly restricted area. The proposal by proponents is to provide for residential hens as a by right use in all R1 zone districts in the city. That accounts to approximately 86,000, a minimum of 86,000 lots in the city, and it looks like this on the map. Accepting the light green, although there is a permission for it now, from a residential perspective, it's not really rational to think of those areas as for residential keepings of hens. If the proponent's proposal was supported, that would mean that all of the dark green in the area in the city would be an allowance by right in the city. So there are pros and pros to, or positives related to an allowance for the keeping of urban hens. There's fresh eggs and food security that lessens the need for commercially produced eggs. Chickens provide for pest control, and they eat bugs on property and the like. Their manure can be used to enhance compost. They can even be pets and provide a relaxing and calming social friend, as it were. They're also inexpensive and can be easy to maintain. And a lot of these benefits are expounded upon in the proponents' Welcome to Bakersfield Urban Backyard Hens website, which provides a plethora of positive information as it relates to the raising of urban hens. Within that website does include their proposed ordinance, and within that ordinance it states that we believe these expectations are reasonable, fair, and should be approved. But as I note, the website really has a very distinct focus only upon the positives as it relates to keeping of urban hens. There are negative impacts. Let's look at those. Chickens can be attributed to multiple nuisances. There are sanitation issues with odors and flies. There can be noise from roosters, although roosters aren't proposed as part of the proposed ordinance. But there are some dominant hens that may crow, make a lot of noise when laying eggs, and in my research, there are even some hen species that have more of a screech associated with them. They can attract rodents and vermin, and to feed on the chicken feed, manure, and the eggs, of course. There's health concerns associated with E. coli and salmonella outbreaks. And chicks can be difficult to sex, since not all chicks are sold as hens. Chickens as a flock type species can easily spread certain diseases to other birds within the flock. So in trying to get an understanding of the issues associated with the cons of urban hens, staff went and did an exploratory look at backyard chickens through other websites. Backyard Chickens here is a forum that's a pretty interesting forum. It's widely used. There is over 400,000 users on this site, and they have well over 1 million threads that are active at this particular point in time. And they give us a good look at backyard chickens from multiple perspectives. My observations are that, and if you look at some of these where there's a photograph of someone's favorite rooster, and then there's ways to build a chicken coop and the like, and you know, how to and helpful hints as it relates to raising urban hens, that a lot of the threads, they start out as very positive threads. Here's a picture of my flock, and so on and so forth. And look, I'm getting 8 eggs a day. But over time, there are as many threads that start out with titles like this, whether it's rats everywhere, or how do I get rid of the smell, or I need advice on a sick and dying flock, or any one of a number of other threads. Neighbors have threatened to shoot my chickens. Help, my new neighbors suddenly hate chickens, which was a very interesting read. In any case, also issues associated with chicks dropping dead and not knowing exactly how to address those things. Backyard Chickens allowed me to kind of look at all of the positives and negatives and provide a more balanced perspective of the use overall. Over the course of my research, there was also released by the Center for Disease Control for a salmonella outbreak, which affected nearly 1,000 people and included a fatality. About 25% of the people affected by the outbreak were children. And the outbreak was traced to backyard chickens. So these are real issues. I'm not trying to overemphasize them, but at the same token, I want to make certain that council understands that where there are many positives to chickens, there are also potential negatives. And because there's potential negative aspects, cities often adopt ordinances and require permits. And the permits can be just ministerial or discretionary, and they might address minimum lot sizes or enclosure sizes, setbacks to dwellings, to property lines, the maximum number of chickens. Many of these things are addressed within the proposed ordinance as well, whether the chickens can be personal or business in terms of the selling of eggs. And in some cases, there's requirements for property owner signatures from adjacent property owners and other plans for the removal of expired animals. The reason for those ordinances is, and their purpose is, to mitigate potentially adverse impacts on adjacent properties by reason of dust or noise or blight or odor or fumes or lights or insect infestations and the like. So staff decided they would also look at our comparable cities as a guide to what other cities are doing as it relates to ordinances specific to urban hens. I would note that the green column there, all of the 10 comparable cities that are on the cities list, and I might add that we exempted the 3 counties because counties typically have provisions for agricultural activities even in most of their residential zones. My last home was on an acre where my neighbor had horses and he had chickens and they had goats and the like. So it should be noted though that all of the municipalities have a provision for urban hens. Let's look closer at that. Noting that we adopt ordinances to mitigate adverse impacts, my look at or examination of the ordinances provided me a glimpse at how cities do that. One of the first ways they do that is through parcel sizing. And if you look at the four cities that are highlighted, Fresno, Ontario, Riverside, and Stockton, you might note that the minimum size for a parcel to provide for the keeping of urban hens is 20,000 square feet. And note that the city currently provides for a 24,000 square foot minimum lot size in the residential suburban zone. So, and Fresno, although there's a provision for the keeping of hens, has a 36,000 square foot lot size in any residential zone. Ontario, half acre. Stockton, full acre of land to provide for urban hens. So that's one way that municipalities are addressing ordinances that look to minimize those adverse impacts. Another way that cities utilize ordinances to mitigate adverse impacts is through setbacks. And Fresno, well, we'll just stay with Glendale, Modesto, Pasadena, and San Bernardino. Glendale has a 300-foot setback to structure for chickens, where when you think about that, if you were to provide for 250 feet of separation on your own property, and then with an expectation of an additional 50 feet beyond for your adjoining properties, you'd be looking at something like a 6-acre parcel. So although there's an allowance for it, I dare say there are very few residential parcels in the city of Glendale that are over 5.5 acres in size. Modesto has a 40-foot, and that's a 40-foot to your own home as well as to any neighboring property's residential structure. Pasadena requires on-site to be outside of the setback area and off-site to provide a minimum of 35 feet. And San Bernardino has a kind of a sliding scale as it addresses chickens from 2 to 24, where the setback shifts as the number of birds increases. So it essentially is 50 to 100 foot for the setback on-site and off-site. So it requires a significantly sized lot to provide for those required setbacks. It also mitigates potential impacts upon neighbors by requiring a certain separation from the use. In some cases, cities mitigate the potentially adverse impacts through both setbacks and lot size. Fresno, Ontario, Riverside, and Stockton have ordinances that specifically speak to a minimum size as well as a minimum setback. There are two cities that have very liberal requirements. They both require a permit, but when you look at their overall ordinance, Fremont is a maximum of 6 birds and a 6,000 square foot minimum lot size. And Oxnard, in speaking with Officer Villalobos of the Oxnard PD, they actually, although their ordinance online says 25 birds, she stated that it was only 20. And I asked both of the cities, both Fremont and Oxnard, whether they had a lot of people taking advantage of an opportunity for urban hens in the city, especially with a relatively non-restrictive ordinance in place. And Oxnard's police department, Ms. Villalobos, noted that they don't have very many urban hens in the city, and her explanation for that was because there was a real vermin impacts associated with their urban hens, and so consequently they would receive complaints, and so over time there's very few people that are actually taking advantage of the allowance. The outlier would be Fremont. In talking with Fremont, they have very few problems with it, but they also have very few people that are actually taking advantage of the allowance. So I asked the officer, well, how many people might use the area, use this opportunity? And I said, 1 in 100 lots, 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000. I said, you're not on the record. But they really couldn't put their finger on it, but there were very few people that the officer could speak to as related to taking advantage of what is the most liberal allowance that's there. So we look at setbacks as an option. This is a highly unscientific approach, but I just zoomed into a part of the city and said, okay, if the city provided a 30-foot setback from hen house to adjoining structures as well as the structure on site, I counted up these lots, measured off where a hen house might be able to be kept on these individual lots, and you have about a 1 in 10 average. 7 in 74 in this picture, and I kind of feel like this is a pretty atypical lotting pattern within the city. There might be a very similar type of density if the city were to implement some ordinance that allowed for the use in an R1 zone, but provided for a reduced setback than the one we currently have, which is 100 foot to structure, to hen house, and 50 foot to any structure. That's a byproduct of the fact that urban residential properties don't have large setbacks that easily accommodate a potentially adverse activity. So zooming into just a block of this area, typically you've got between 15 and 25 feet of rear yard area. So in this case, you have 40 feet between structures, and it's pretty atypical up the line, about 40 to 45 feet. And so consequently, it's difficult to find a 30-foot setback where all of the structures in proximity to the use might have some reasonable separation. And this is just with a 30-foot setback. So conclusions. There are benefits to keeping chickens. Whether it's on Backyard Chickens or on the Bub website, there is a long list of reasons why the keeping of chickens can be a positive activity. But the citizen's interest is best served by protecting the peace and quiet and quality of life issues that residents of Bakersfield and other cities come to expect within their residential neighborhoods. By right allowance for R1 zones has the potential for real problems and complaints over a huge swath of the city, 85,000 plus lots, to be generated that could be disproportionate to the noted benefits that I'm not discounting. There's also could be added costs associated with code enforcement in addressing nuisances, and the code enforcement team is a high energy team right now that is stretched in terms of delivering on the desires and expectations of the residents of the city. So, and those resources could probably be better used elsewhere. A fee permitting system and the establishment of provisions that might reduce those potential impacts through an ordinance amendment would be suggested as it relates to managing city resources and protecting the rights of neighbors. So what are the options before council as it relates to this workshop? The first option would be that you entertain no change, that allowances in the ag and ag-related zones, the A, RH, and RS zones be sustained. A second option would be to promote the proponent's request for by right in R1 zones, which would provide for single-family residential zones, and that would provide for 12 birds that can be out of the pen during the day, in pen at night, with a 10-foot setback to structure. And the last would be to direct staff to prepare an alternative ordinance per your direction. That ordinance could include specific performance standards where staff could monitor the approved locations, and it might include noticing of neighbors and acknowledgments of compliance by permitted property owners. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. We'll hear from the public first, and then we'll come back to council for comments. Madam Clerk, do we have public statements?
Mayor Go, we have received 16 public speaker cards on this item.
Thank you. And typically we allow 15 minutes per topic. So I'm going to encourage you. I know many of you have been here before and we've heard from you. So let's try to get through and get as many people in as possible and avoid being repetitive. If you agree with somebody who just spoke, maybe just acknowledge that instead of saying it all over again. So Madam Clerk, would you call the first public speaker, please?
Joseph Candle.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself. Yes. And pull.
Am I allowed to take it off?
Sure.
Okay. My comments are going to be a little bit redundant here from what the gentleman just said, but that's what I prepared, so I'm going to go through with it. So it's been 8 years now since the council looked at this issue. You spent tens of thousands of dollars 8 years ago of our taxpayer money studying this and proposing that all residents, regardless of zoning, including R1, be allowed to raise chickens on their property. Finally correctly concluding that there were too many negative impacts from waste, smell, noise. We've gone through all of that. Not to mention the possibility of infestation of disease created by chickens. Again, just on July 29th, the Centers of Disease Control reported outbreaks of salmonella infections linked to backyard chickens. A dozen eggs can be bought for $1.70. Is this worth risking a good salmonella infection for you and your neighbors and your entire community? I pose the question, what has happened in the last 8 years for the council to now regurgitate this matter and to now again spend thousands of dollars of taxpayer money again in these lean times to reintroduce the issue in the midst of the mess we're all in? Has chicken manure somehow become magically less hazardous and less infectious of producing disease than it was 8 years ago? What has happened? I propose absolutely nothing has changed except the political climate and certain political goals. What has changed in 8 years that I can assess is that this government is seemingly and less respectful of its primary tax-based citizens and quality of life of its R1 family zoning and covenant rights the citizens have paid for. Myself, for 40 years, that I have supported this council for 40 years, not to have the potential plague sickness in my neighborhood via R1 covenants being negated. In penning the thoughts above, this is the end. I keep remembering a line that keeps repeating to me from the movie Forrest Gump, where Forrest would do something unexplainable and then was invariably asked, "Forrest, are you stupid or something?" I'm off to get my flu shot now because Chinese chickens will be creating a worldwide pandemic this fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kendall. Next speaker, please.
Kenneth Hirsch.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next one also? And that person, if you would just wait back there in that corner, please, just so we can move things along quickly.
Ryan Denbosky.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, my name is Kenneth Hirsch. I'm a resident of Stockdale Estates and also belong to the Stockdale Estates Community Action Group. I learned a few things here today. I came in here because I thought this was going to be a total workshop, but I learned some things. And Mr. Boyle, that was a nice discussion that you presented. 86,000 R1 zone lots. The last time you just discovered chickens was 8 years ago. And now you're back. Wild animals attracted to the scent of the chickens. That is true. Where I live in Stockdale Estates, if you've got anything that skunks, possums, raccoons, even feral cats, you're going to get them in your backyards. And the things that go with them, disease, and to children, danger. Disease control. I thought Mr. Kendall covered that quite well. That's a major issue, it seems like. It has been in the past. Permits. We can require a permit from everybody who wants to have a couple hens in a pen in their backyard. Who's going to check it? Just another way to get license money, or what's the game? Who's going to check it? That's going to cost money. Slaughtering. No slaughtering. Who's going to check that? Who's going to keep their fingers on that? And when they do slaughter, and they try to slaughter a hen or two in their backyard, where are the remains going to end up? In the garbage. Are they going to stink to high heaven in the neighborhood until they're picked up? Considering present lot sizes for homes, single-family homes, setbacks, side setbacks, and backyard setbacks, 20 feet in some cases, according to his definition, most of the people in these new homes can't afford to have even a chicken in the backyard. This is a crucial topic. This is a crucial topic, and it should be discussed when the total population can come in and express itself. No limit on seats or anything else to go with.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker, please. And then call the next one so we can have that person ready.
Ryan Denbosky, Zoe Pelishek.
Hi.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Ryan Demboski. I am a fire engineer with Bakersfield City Fire Department. So speaking from my boss today. I was going to give you guys my written speech that was presented via email, but I will actually avoid that and kind of touch on a few random issues that I was not anticipating talking about right now. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit flustered because hearing these last two speakers is kind of a weird way of presenting chicken ownership. Though I do not currently own chickens on my current location, I will say that urban hens create a sustainable food source for a family, an educational tool for that family, a fun family hobby, and yes, chicken manure is very useful and beneficial in the backyard setting. Yes, you can go to Lowe's and buy it, but you can also source it yourself, and it works just as well. I moved to Bakersfield in 2005 from Michigan. I originally came out here to be a high school teacher, so the fact that I'm standing in this room that claims to be a progressive community and an agricultural hub in Central California, I'm kind of baffled by that fact, that I could move from Michigan to Bakersfield, and all of a sudden in 2020 I'd be having this discussion about should we allow backyard hens? Backyard hens make a lot of sense. And it's very interesting to see a presentation from the city which brought up an online forum to find all kind of negative things. And we picked them out, and rats, and whatever. But if you go to any online forum, I'd like to also recommend that the council consider maybe looking at a plumbing forum, and you'll find all kinds of plumbing related issues. You go to a gardening forum and you'll find I have aphids in my yard. It's just the nature of the beast, and I think we should, instead of looking at the negatives, be looking at this is a group that actually has a way of solving problems and crowdsourcing them. It's a fantastic community. Backyard hens are a very beneficial part. That's going to be talked about many, many times, as you can address and attest to. Without actually hitting on this, I can't believe that in 2020 I would actually be sitting in a room where someone would make a comment about a Chinese chicken virus. Like, come on, people. Progressive community, right? Sound of something better? It's disappointing and disheartening, to say the least. But what I will add is please do consider the ordinance that's been provided. It's not going to be a thousands and thousands of dollars expenditure for the city, because we've drafted an ordinance for you that's very, very easy, that can be rubber stamped at a moment's notice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. And the following one.
Zoe Pelishek and Maddie Pelishek.
Thank you. And just encouraging you not to be redundant. And we've heard some of the comments before, so feel free to move ahead so we can accommodate as many people as possible. Welcome. Please introduce yourself. And can you just move there you go. Just move it a little closer to you. Thanks.
My name is Zoe Pelishek, and I live in Ward 5. I would love to live where chickens are already permitted. However, that's not really an option for us, seeing as how it's too expensive to move and out of the budget. Having hens would allow us to be more self-sufficient, providing eggs and protein. We would not have to rely on the government for these resources, and they would be especially beneficial during this pandemic, providing resources we would otherwise need to go to the store for. Having hens would also provide an opportunity for youth like me to experience raising small livestock animals. I've always lived in zoning where chickens are not permitted, so this passing would give me the opportunity to finally get to experience and learn from it. Chickens can also make very good pets. They can be relaxing, friendly, and entertaining. They make a great companion. Hens are also a good form of pest control and can reduce the number of pesky bugs that bite and eat up plants. And not only can they help keep the number of bugs down, but they can also help minimize green waste, eating many extra kitchen scraps. Hens can be a bit loud at times, however, they are quieter and make noise less often than dogs, who are already permitted. In addition, chickens' waste has less odor than dogs. And this is why I support raising backyard hens. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Pelishek, next speaker, please.
Maddie Pelishek and Ceci Mangum.
And Ms. Kristen, would you please help move the mic down for her, please? Yes. Welcome, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Maddie Pelishek, and I am 8 years old. I also live in Ward 5. Hens should be legal in the city because they provide daily food. They are very good pets. They are very good pets because they are very energetic and friendly. They are cute with different colored feathers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next speaker, please.
Ceci Mangum and MT Marakel.
You can lower it a little bit, Kristen. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ceci Mangum. I'm 9 years old. I also live in Ward 5. Hens should be allowed in the city because they make eggs. Recently, during coronavirus, eggs were out in stores, but having backyard hens would allow each family to easily access their own eggs. I also think hens should be allowed because they are friendly and can make good pets. It's fun to experience them as pets and see them lay eggs for the first time. They aren't as loud as dogs, and that's a good thing. They're cute, cuddly, and each with different feathers and different colored eggs, and it's good to experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mangum. And next speaker, please. We have 1 minute and 20 seconds left, and how many more speakers do we have who wish to speak, Ms. City Clerk?
We have 8 more speakers, Mayor.
Okay, so we're just going to ask you to expedite it, and I'll add 10 more minutes right now to this. And so if you can just move along as quickly as possible. Welcome, Mr. Miracle.
MT Miracle. I would like to publicly state that I am disappointed with the unbalanced presentation of the workshop packet. I provided you a research-based and reasonable proposed ordinance. I am confident that after you hear how respectful and responsible the hen community is, that you will be in agreement that amending the ordinance to allow backyard hens is the right thing to do. Here are a few statements I believe that we all can agree on. Chickens are domesticated animals that people currently have as pets. Most citizens will not want to own chickens, as not all residents want to own dogs. Bakersfield City's boundaries intertwine with the county's boundaries. Many cities in California allow chickens. Approximately 10 annual dog complaints would be a very low number, and our code enforcement department would be thankful for those responsible dog owners. The phrase social outcry should be reserved for such topics as Black Lives Matter, food security, and public safety, and not the backyard hen topic as it is in this workshop packet. A decrease in the number of complaints from approximately 35 is documented in the 2013 majority report to approximately 10 as reported in today's workshop packet would be something to be recognized as positive and to be celebrated. Received 65 emails in favor for while receiving 0 documented comments against would be evidence of community support. The process of a hen laying an egg is a miracle. Did you know that the R1 zone allows 60 pigeons with no permit? Did you know that the RS zone allows unlimited roosters and hens without a permit? Did you know that the 2013 majority report was wrong in their conclusion when they thought the number of chicken complaints would go up? Did you know that the backyard hens actually save the city money by reducing kitchen and yard waste? Did you know that half of the cities that have been provided to you in the comparable city chart have 0 minimum lot size requirements? Did you know that the average hens allowed on those same 5 comparable cities have an average of 16 hens allowed? Did you know that the workshop packet states, a quote, leads to a finding that Bakersfield current zoning provides for a potentially less restrictive environment for chickens, end quote. Did you know that this process does not have to be complicated? We have already done the work for you. Please review our proposed ordinance. Our request is reasonable. As you work towards amending the city ordinance to allow backyard hens, I am available right now to answer any questions you might have on the topic. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Miracle, and thank you for the 16 letters that you provided. Next speaker, please.
Becky Pelishek and Keith Nettleton.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Becky Pelishek. I live in Ward 5, and I wanted to first say that the girls, that they all wrote their own speeches and prepared their own thoughts and points. So
Great job.
I thought that was pretty neat. So I would love to live in an area where chickens are allowed, and although I would love to live in county zoning, moving is expensive, and bigger pieces of land are outside our budget, so that's hasn't been an option for us. Other than moving not being an option for us, self-sufficiency is is important to us. We want to be able to be self-sufficient and not have to depend on supply chains or the government to be able to feed our family. So, and especially in times like this, I know obviously they don't happen very often, but we do want to be able to have, take care of ourselves. The other thing I wanted to add is that, like somebody else said, that the Central Valley is the most prolific agricultural region, or one of the most productive and prolific agricultural regions in the world. And being here, I feel like we should be one of the more accepting cities to be able to accept backyard hens, because being agriculture is in the DNA of our city, our county, in this region. And I also wanted to point out that about dogs, our neighbor's dog is very, very stinky, especially in the summer, in the heat of the summer. Our other neighbor has dogs, and it's very, very loud and keeps us up through the night. So although those are legal, they have problems as well. So, and I wanted to say too, if people end up getting a chick that ends up being a rooster, most of the feed stores will take them back, so that doesn't end up being a problem. So I wanted to thank you for your time, and that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Pelishek.
You're welcome.
Next speaker, please, and the following one after that, too.
Kevin Nettleton and Keith Nettleton and Kevin Lugo.
Welcome, and would you raise the mic, please?
I will.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Keith, and I'm glad to be here. This is my prayer to God and to my country, all races, creeds, and colors. I am schizophrenic, and I have an IQ of 165. And I am mentally challenged. I have been struck by lightning in Kansas, and I do believe in out-of-body experiences. And in the inalienable rights to live and to serve, freedom and the pursuit of happiness for all. Is there any comments? No?
We don't take comments at this time. Thank you
Oh,
for
I'm
your
sorry.
comments.
Okay.
Next speaker, please.
Kevin Lugo and Kirk Boland.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Kevin Lugo. Good afternoon, council members. I'm here to express my support for backyard hens and address some of the benefits that I felt were not highlighted enough in the Planning Committee's presentation. The main advantage I feel not yet mentioned or not mentioned enough is that backyard hens do actually have the potential to increase our quality and enhance our quality of life and the life of that chicken as well. Keeping chickens not only benefits or yields of benefits already presented and already communicated to you guys, but it gives people the ability to become more self-sufficient and allows our families and allows us to teach each other values and learning experiences that we haven't had before in the past. Values ranging from the responsibility of taking care of a living creature and those that other speakers have presented as well as self-sufficiency. In times like these, when companies are struggling and just the prices of necessities have skyrocketed and you can't even find them, the need for self-sufficiency has become so apparent. Just like victory gardens in our nation's history. So I ask you guys to take careful consideration in this ordinance and creating an ordinance that asserts care and control for backyard hens. For if we have backyard hens, we will have that opportunity to become more self-sufficient as a nation. So again, I ask you in these trying times to please greatly consider supporting the movement of backyard hens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Next speaker, please. And the following one.
Bruce
Wasn't it that ready?
Bagwell and Benjamin.
Sure.
Dear members of the Bakersfield City Council, thank you for taking the time to hear the community's desire to allow backyard hens. There are already...
Please introduce yourself, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
I'm Kirk Boland, Ward 4.
Thank you.
There are already many backyard hens within the city limits of Bakersfield, even more so since the COVID-19 pandemic. The Roundup had lines going out the door for months with people purchasing baby chicks and were selling out quickly. This presentation makes the assumption that the ordinance will increase calls for service. According to the majority report from 2013, in 2011 there was 32 citizen complaints, 2012 47 citizen complaints, and 2013 there was 30 citizen complaints. And now we're averaging 10 complaints a year, most of them regarding roosters, which we are not advocating. I say that the hen owners of Bakersfield are doing a pretty good job. In 2012, the Legislative and Litigation Committee wanted to use the ordinance from Santa Rosa and San Diego for guidance. Those ordinances were too new at the time to know what potential problems could arise by allowing backyard hens within residential zones. I have contacted multiple cities to ask them for the ordinances, if their ordinances have increased their calls for service or have caused any other problems. 5 of those cities have responded, 2 of those being San Diego and Santa Rosa. The other 3 responses I received were from Long Beach, Oxnard, and Murrieta. The letter I received from San Diego says the ordinance allowing backyard chickens has not had a major impact on the amount of calls received by Code Enforcement Division. Calls regarding this issue are very rare. There are no other problems regarding this ordinance which I am aware. This is from Leslie Stinnett, the Deputy Director of Development Services. Santa Rosa. I have attached the ordinance for future reference. Please refer to our website, which I handed to you guys can look at. I've been in this position a little over a year. There's no major impacts of calls or problems that I am aware of. And the next one was from Long Beach, from the Animal Care Service Department, Dave Lynn. No impact, not very many permits requested, and no additional complaints received. No problems with the ordinance. And the other one was from Oxnard, Officer Villalobos. She says, calls for service, reference issues, concerns, or nuisance complaints involving chickens are minimal, unlike roosters. These types of calls do not have an impact on our call volume as they are minimal. When addressing these calls, the 2 common complaints in reference are loose chickens and unsanitary conditions. No other pattern of problems have been identified at this time. I'm out of time, so thank you for your time listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've already extended the time, and we've gone over that. How many more speakers do we have, Madam Clerk?
We have 4 more speakers.
Okay, I'm going to allow you, but if you could just make your comments very brief, please. Very, very brief. We have another item. We still need to hear from council, and we have another item that we need to consider in closed session. Please introduce yourself and welcome.
Hi, my name is Bruce Bagwell. I'm going to read somebody who couldn't be here. She gave me a letter to read. She's a Bakersfield tax-paying resident. We live on a quarter-acre suburban neighborhood in Bakersfield, likely developed by Councilman Bruce Freeman. Within 1 mile, there are 6 other families that we know of who own hens. Our family owns 7 hens. I'm going to skip some of this. Hens play an integral role in their backyard gardening stuff. Compost, the egg quality. The nutritious eggs have been more important than ever in the midst of a pandemic, with a tighter budget than ever and a new reliance on unemployment funds for our household. There are many other benefits as well, especially when raising children and raising hens. These include the science lessons, cooking lessons, and so on. Let's see. I'd like to emphasize that the report states that the city only receives approximately 10 complaints annually. In a city of nearly 400,000 residents, this is extremely low. Furthermore, many residents already own chickens in the city. Our own neighbors have had chickens for 5 years before we even knew. As others have said, backyard hen ownership is everywhere in our city in R1 neighborhoods already. It has been for years. Ownership numbers have been going up over the past years while complaints have been going down. If you do not support this proposed ordinance, thousands of Bakersfield families will continue to own them anyway. But for the sake of our fellow city dwellers who have intolerant neighbors, we hope you will support all of our rights to food sustainability and sovereignty. Hens deserve a place in the backyards of city residents. Just as with the Victory Gardens following both World Wars, we are in unprecedented times, and our food supply has shown its fragility. If yappy dogs have a place in the backyard, so should hens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Benjamin, Alex Duque, and George Fuentes.
Thank you. And again, just asking you to expedite at this point, please. And young ladies who spoke, thank you very much. It's always good to have young people participate in the civic process. Good luck in school. Have a great year. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
This is Benjamin Vinluan. I'm in full support for having a backyard chicken. I live where I grew up and live with the chicken. I have no problem at all. That's it.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Next speaker, please.
Alex Duque and George Fuentes.
Well,
Afternoon.
good
My name is Alex Dulay. I grew up raising chickens myself. My parents taught me, so I support the initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dulay. And Mr. Fuentes. Is Mr. Fuentes still here? He had to go back to work. Okay. Thank you very much, and that concludes the request for public speakers. And now I'm going to return it to council for comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there another card? Mr. Simmons? Somehow we must have missed you. Come on up and make your comments. I have a Simmons.
Thank you for finding my card. Listening to the speakers, there's a lot of opinions. And in this situation regarding the city of Bakersfield, 400,000 people, opinions are great, but we really want to go off facts. And we want to go off, especially in our situation with our pandemic, we want to have a healthy community. And we don't want to do anything to spread disease and fatality. I'll read this letter that my wife and I composed for the council. I'm writing this letter on behalf of myself and my wife, Gary and Linda Simmons. We are residents of Stockdale Estates and have lived in our home for 32 years. We have the unfortunate experience that chickens have inhabited the home behind our backyard fence for many years. The noise, the smell of chicken manure, and the visibility of rats being attracted to our backyard neighbor's home is a horrendous experience. It is unrealistic to think that the city of Bakersfield would pass an ordinance that would allow this unsanitary condition throughout every neighborhood in the city. We pay for the services of current pest control to spray our backyard and perimeter fence, foliage, trees, and pool patio in order to eliminate the infectious disease chickens and their parasites spread to humans. The pest control company has set up rat traps on the perimeter of the fence to exterminate the rats that feed on the manure in the chicken habitat. Recently, we've had to hire a company to trap the raccoons that were going over the fence and feeding on the chicken manure and the chicken feed. The description of hens in the presentation from the city councilman is a false and misleading sales misrepresentation to project benign environment. Hens need roosters and roosters need hens to multiply. Chickens multiply rapidly by laying and hatching eggs. Pandemic environment. The city council seems to be oblivious. We are experiencing a life-threatening virus environment. Chickens and the disease that they transmit will produce additional human suffering and illness. The city councilman that would endorse this life-threatening ordinance should be and will be held responsible for the death of one individual related to disease transmitted from a chicken coop, environment which produces manure, smell, lice, rats, rodents, and disease. Please review the information available in the administrative report generated from 2012 when this ordinance was first introduced to the city of Bakersfield and voted against. The information included relates to the infestation of disease created from chickens, hens, or roosters. John Cox of the Bakersfield Californian produced a very credible article in the Bakersfield Californian in the recent past related to these transmitted chickens, hens, or disease transmitted from chickens, hens, or roosters. I'm 73 years old. My wife is 70. We're both under doctor's care. I'm a cancer survivor and have a non-repairable heart condition. My wife and I are on daily medication or at risk, as well as thousands of people in the city of Bakersfield. The presentation of everybody coming to this microphone is appreciated by me, whether we're opponents or whether we're pro. The testamentary capacity the leadership capacity of some of the presenters is very, very questionable. But they do have a right to say what is on their mind. They do have a right to ask you for your opinion and your consideration. And we thank you very much for all this conversation and all these opinions. But I believe that God will prevail and the facts of life will prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons, and thank you to all our speakers. And Madam Clerk, now would you call for the next item, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Minor detail. The next item would be council comments. I don't see any requests. It's not working. Councilmember Freeman and then Tech Services, would you please try to help us with the technology? So for right now, if this is not working, just raise your hand. Councilmember Freeman and then Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a few questions. Mr. Boyle, can you, just so I understand this, that currently chickens are only allowed in a residential suburban zone. Is that what you started off with your first exhibit?
Thank you, Council Member. In essence, there are 3 districts that allow for chickens, but only one of them, the residential suburban zone, provides for widespread residential use. The ag zone does provide for chickens, and even for commercial chickens on land greater than an acre, but typically you're not going to see residential development in the ag zone or in the residential holding zone. So in our analysis, we wanted to make sure that you understood that, in essence, it's the RS zone where you're going to see a provision for
And that's a very
urban
special,
hens.
and there's only, I don't know, a few of them. So in an R1 zone, if you had an acre lot, but it was just an R1 zone, you could not have chickens.
You could not with an acre lot. There's not a provision for chickens in the R1 zone.
Okay. Also, if a property was in, I guess, an RS zone that allowed it, but I'm not saying this would have happened, but if there were CC&Rs on the property that prevented livestock and chickens and stuff, would those take precedence that you still, if there's CC&Rs on that property, you prohibit it, you still would not be able to do it?
CC&Rs for individual properties would take precedent over the city's ordinance.
Yeah, if somebody did a development out there and say, hey, they're all acre lots, but we prohibit livestock or chickens, and then CC&Rs would take precedent wherever it is.
Yes, the CC&Rs essentially, from a simplistic perspective, can be more restrictive than the city's ordinance. They cannot be less restrictive.
Yeah, okay. And is there a certain number of chickens that one could have that makes raising chickens viable? I saw some of the handouts that were passed out while we were getting bread. One community said 3 chickens. So I just wonder, maybe there's some people from the chicken world here who can say, yes, it's viable to have 3 chickens or 4 chickens. Do you have to have, most places seem to have wanted 12. Do you have to have at least 12, or just not viable to have an operation to raise them?
Well, it's a complex equation as to how many people are going to rely upon the number of chickens that are there in terms of their daily needs. But I think it's pretty safe to say that you're going to get 1 egg per each chicken, maybe 4 eggs per 5 days from each chicken, something along those lines.
Okay, because there was one argument that for sustainability, and then, I don't know, maybe you have to have at least 6 or 12 chickens, and then there was another for just education and learning about animals and nature, and another argument that wasn't the sustainability argument. So I just wondered if they had 4 chickens, if they have the same nuisance that, when you move to 12 or 24, if they're next door to you. So I'm just trying to get a better feeling for, how much of a nuisance, noise, et cetera, is it if you have, one was passed out, said 3 chickens. So somebody's doing it somewhere with only 3 chickens, which I guess isn't really for sustainability.
I don't know if I could add to
you may not be able to
the
answer that.
dialogue.
I'm just kind of wondering here. It seemed like most places placed a minimum half acre, and more than that were more 3/4 of an acre of the surveyed cities, which with the kind of setbacks you have, it's almost impossible to have less than that with these setbacks that are required. Can you do that on a half acre lot to meet all the requirements of, for example, our ordinance? Do we have 30-foot setbacks or?
The current ordinance, which is a 24,000 acre minimum, requires a 100-foot setback from the front property line and a 50-foot setback from adjoining property, so from adjoining structures. So it's very reasonable that you could have chickens within those setbacks in the RS zone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith. And then colleagues on the phone, just remember, if you do want to speak, raise your hand through Zoom.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't understand the staff report and that the conclusions don't match the table. The conclusion is that Bakersfield provides a less restrictive environment than the majority of comparable cities. When I look at the majority, there's 7 cities that have less than 24,000 square feet. And even when you take into the setbacks, I mean, there's more than that. And when you take into account the setbacks, there's still 7 cities that are less restrictive. So that statement does not seem to match the data. The other thing was that the statement was 2 cities have ordinances that function to allow chickens in generally accommodating fashion. And it was Fremont and Oxnard. But I see Pasadena doesn't have a minimum lot size and only has a 35-foot setback. So easily a 10,000 square foot lot would accommodate in Pasadena. That seems to be pretty accommodating. The other thing I had trouble with was, and you went back and checked it, but Ontario, I actually looked up today, and what I seen was 10,000 square foot lots is what it was allowed, and 10 chickens. So even the revised memo didn't match what I found. Lot of potential for problems, potential for added cost. The cities that you talked to said there weren't any problems. The accommodating cities were not having problems. Yes, we have 85,000 lots. No, there's not going to be 85,000 lots with chickens on them. Also, I looked up other cities. San Diego was mentioned. They have a great website explaining what the rules are. To answer Mr. Freeman's question, their minimum is up to 5 chickens if you just meet all minimum setback requirements, which, I mean, property line setbacks. And if you can go 15 chickens if you go 15 feet from all property lines, and you can go 25 chickens if you go 50 feet. So the bigger setbacks, but you can have 5 chickens if you're in an R1 lot and just work within the property line setbacks. Sacramento allows chickens, Los Angeles allows chickens. Even San Francisco, much more urban areas allow chickens. And I had asked Mr. Clegg when I spoke to him, and I didn't know, did we check what the county of Kern does? My ward is has a lot of county islands in it with residential lots. What is the county's ordinance?
Thank you, Councilmember. Mr. Boyle, are you able to speak to the county context?
Staff did not research the county websites because there's an assumption that there'd be a provision for chickens in county zones.
Well, there'd be provisions but there's lot size restrictions. I mean, so you didn't look at the county of Kern?
No, we did not research the
Okay.
counties, 3 counties.
Thank you. Comments was made about chicken smell, they cause noise, they cause rodents. I mean, dogs smell, dogs create a lot of noise, dogs bite. Dogs can carry diseases. I believe it was Kirk Bolin had actually got more feedback than we had from other cities, and they are not showing large problems when they allow chickens. I think they're pets. Dogs and cats are pets. Yes, you have to take care of a dog. You have to take care of cats. Rules are okay. I'm not excited about permits. I've processed permits for 35 years, and it's always more difficult than it is proposed to be. So I guess I would make the referral that staff come back with a proposed ordinance with the restrictions and the as stated by the BH. I know it's not in legal terms and an ordinance would be, but I think that's a good starting conversation. I know, other council members have different opinions, but I think that I, would like to see an ordinance come back, and then we'll see what the rest of the council feels on that. So that's my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Sullivan.
I didn't count the number in favor and the number opposing. I think there were 3 opposing. Did anyone get that count? Certainly a very a strong ratio. Well, sitting up here, there were 3 opposing, all senior citizens. I'm a senior citizen, and I'm in favor. Yay. Very strongly in favor. I think it's wonderful, a wonderful idea. Worked on it 10 years ago, and it just got so complicated. And that's what causes a problem for the city when there's just so many restrictions and count the number of chickens. And, I am in favor. I'm not going to raise chickens. I'll go and buy my eggs at the store. But you could be sure if I had a family living next door, and if I thought, now what's that sound? Is that clucking? How wonderful, a family that has chickens. What a great experience for kids and healthy. So I'm all about quality of life and families, family entertainment and family experiences, and how wonderful. So, we senior citizens, we need to lighten up a little bit. And also, anytime I hear about potential issues, I'm not that concerned about, what can't be a potential issue? Now, too many other things to worry about. Can be a nuisance. What can't be a nuisance? A lot of things can be a nuisance, but we're talking about living, we're talking about experiences. So I think it's great. People have them right now, and you could be sure if they go to the trouble of getting them, raising them for the benefit of their children or for the benefit of their food, they're going to take care of them. And if they don't, then there's a complaint, and it may be the first complaint regarding chickens for the year. It might be the second or third. But I have had very noisy dogs living next to me, and there's not that much you can do about it, and it's really discouraging. So and they can also be dangerous. Dogs can be dangerous. So that's why we keep them in the yards. But I'm delighted. I appreciate the group that has done the research, and they feel very strongly about this, and I support it 100%. So I'm all open for new good ideas, and I will support. I hope it'll be as least complicated as possible, at the least restrictive as possible. That is the way it will be made easy for our city, and families shouldn't have to worry about just we have one too many chickens, so just take care of them, enjoy them. And it's a wonderful experience for a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everyone who joined us today and spoke. I'll try to make my comments quick. Just a comment, I read the staff report, and I was really interested in the paragraph regarding the excerpt from the USA Today related to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention regarding a salmonella outbreak. And I wondered if staff had, if there was some sort of advisory issued by the CDC regarding backyard chickens that cities might consider not approving any type of backyard hen ordinance, or if there was any advisories towards cities specifically. Because what I've read is that the advisory to the public was simply for folks to wash their hands and to be more mindful when they're dealing with their chickens. And so that's not a question for today. I just like to, as we revisit this topic, get a sense of why staff included that paragraph in this staff report without any clear direction to city in terms of policy. And then, the question was asked by one of the speakers, what has changed since the last time the council has considered this issue? And I thought that was an interesting question. And so I thought about it myself, and it's pretty obvious. The global pandemic has only exacerbated many issues that our society, our community faces, and one being food insecurity. And the ward, at least that I represent, there are many neighborhoods where families are food insecure. And so, as we've seen, and as many public speakers have commented, there are many families who are building victory gardens during the pandemic. And as we've seen historically, that has included backyard chickens. And so, I think for that reason, I think that's an important reason enough to support this as a city. And so, I'm looking forward to bringing this issue back up and considering it, and I support Councilmember Smith's referral.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Rivera, Councilmember Weir, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Rivera does.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I agree with everything that's been said, and I support Councilmember Smith's request to bring an item back. I think similar to what Councilmember Gonzalez's district faces, I have many neighbors with chickens, and really, one, never found them to be in a position. Two, I think it's in this day and age a good thing for people to have. I think if nothing else changed, I'd hate to get out of the routine of this catch-22 position I feel like we're putting people in by having a rule that says you can't have it when we know full well that many Bakersfield residents do. And I don't believe in perpetuating or forcing folks to hide something or operate in the dark or otherwise try and prevent themselves from being cited or something else. So I think it should be made as easy as possible, and I'd love to continue that conversation and consider an ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rivera. Councilmember Weir, would you like to speak? Councilmember Weir, would you turn your microphone on if you, there you go. Councilmember Weir, would you like to offer a comment?
No.
Oh, no. Okay. That would be it. And then, City Manager, are you wanting to speak at this point?
I would just like to make some clarifying comments towards
Sure.
the end if there are no other council comments.
I see Councilmember Smith just, oh.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor and Council, just to clarify a couple of points and also what I heard to help give direction to staff. Also wanted to follow up on the issue about Kern County. I apologize for the miscommunication that we had, that there is some information about the county, and wanted to provide that really quickly. The Kern County does not allow chickens in R1 zones. They do have an A1 zone that does allow urban hens with a conditional use permit on a minimum of 2.5 acres. So that's the Kern County ordinance that's out there. And sorry that we didn't get that into our tables, but we'll make sure that's part of what we bring back in our research ultimately. What I would reflect on, what I understand from the referral, is to go back and consider an ordinance and bring that back. What I would appreciate clarification on is, when we look at the table of comparable cities, some are more permissive, others do have some lot size requirements and some setback requirements. What has been proposed by members of the community is an R1 by right use with fairly minimal setbacks. I want to be clear that if staff goes back and comes forward with a proposed ordinance that will likely take into account the feedback from other communities about the setbacks that they have, and it's not likely to be a by right use that's quite as permissive. We'll probably look at some of those mitigating setback sizes and mitigating lot sizes, and that can be a discussion point, in that ordinance that's brought back. But just wanted to be clear that we'll probably look at all of those comparables to consider and including in our ordinance, and absent other specific council direction, that's kind of the approach that we'll take.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I would respond a little bit to Mr. Clegg's comment.
Microphone?
I've got it on. I'm not close enough, I guess. As I stated, I'm not excited about the permit process.
No.
And I think you can have, the way I read San Diego is they have rules, but you don't have to go down and get a permit. And if you don't follow the rules, then, the neighbor can turn you in, and they've got a very nice website, and I copied it, and it's, the number of chickens is based on the setbacks. As I stated, 5 chickens if you're just within the property line setbacks, 15 chickens if you're 15 feet from all property lines, and 25 chickens if you're 50 feet from any building used as a residence. So, that's where I would start. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I think San Diego makes sense to me, and it seems to be working for them. Unless anybody else wants to talk, I will make the motion to.
Well, I see Councilmember Freeman would like to speak. Go ahead.
Okay. You're asking for some direction, and I'm sure we all have some different opinions. So I'm not sure how I feel about the permit process or the sort of by right once the rules are established. But I do think the lot sizes and setbacks are critical when you get into, agriculture and livestock. And before, I hadn't really looked up our ordinance before this meeting. And I saw the survey. I sort of assumed it was 2-acre rural lots because that was kind of the norm. And I thought in communities, you can do the stuff with horses and everything. 2-acre lots. And when I saw we only do a half acre, I thought, well, we're pretty flexible. I think requirements like half acres and reasonable setbacks are pretty important. So I hope we at least have some, hope we have some of those carried forward from the current ordinance when you bring something back. But that's pretty much how I feel. I get complaints all the time from people who didn't buy in a Castle and Cook development, so there's no CCNRs. I think before we started developing, or at least till I got here in 1993, people just weren't doing them, even though they might have large lots. And those are where my largest complaints are now, is people saying, okay, he's got too many trucks in the driveway, just pounded his house pink. And most of these things are by right because there's no restrictions. The developer put no restrictions in it, but I think they get a little upset because they thought they had more protection. They didn't really know what CCNRs were, 30 years ago. So I do think we have to, let's remember, as much as, there's a positive argument for learning about nature and chickens, and I'm not sure, I'm really not buying the sustainability that when eggs are so cheap, I don't think there's a cost issue here in obtaining food. But I think there's some value in raising livestock. So I just hope we keep it reasonable. I thought we had a pretty reasonable ordinance now. If it's going to be changed, I hope we keep it reasonable, because there's a lot of people out there who will be real surprised, and I think we'll get a lot of complaints if we start having chickens on small lots. And we're urbanized, and all the pressures of land development and everything comes into Bakersfield, and everything on your plans go higher and higher densities. Save land, use infrastructure efficiently, use energy efficiently. So everything is to get higher and higher densities. That's going to be a problem with livestock. I think we have to be really cognizant of that. There's a balance here, but we are very urban now and becoming more and more urban with every development. So we can't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. Rather than leave it up to staff, we have a difference of opinion, and our manager's trying to evaluate I know you're thinking about how it should be written, of course. So I would recommend it go to committee. That would delay it one meeting, have it discussed, welcome the different people from the community come and to discuss it. It just seems to me like it would come up with something that would be that would work better. So I'd be interested to hear what the other, just to make it so it truly ends up being what's going to work best for our community, rather than expecting the staff to come up with all the variations that could be in the ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan. We'll have the city attorney speak, and then Councilmember Smith.
Councilmember Sullivan, you read my mind, and I was going to ask Councilmember Smith if this would be acceptable to you. I heard your comments to basically direct staff to come back with an ordinance pretty much following the BUBH guidelines that was in the report, no permits and as few restrictions as possible. If my notes are correct, I think a majority of your colleagues were in favor of that. I do think, though, it would be beneficial if we could take it to committee. I know that legislative and the Leg and Lit committee is supposed to meet this upcoming August 17th. I believe that's going to be postponed. I think we can do exactly what Councilmember Sullivan is suggesting. If you could make that motion with that guideline and parameters, we could send it, I think, to Leg and Lit, and we could have it back to you by September the 23rd. That way we're just missing the one meeting, council meeting, which is September the 9th. I don't think, again, realistically, I don't think we could come back with first reading of an ordinance anyway by September the 9th, but I think we could get to Leg and Lit, iron it out for you, knowing where the majority of the council is, and bring it back for first reading on September the 23rd.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Every time things go to committee, they get lost forever.
You have my word as the city attorney, since ordinances fall under my department, that I will have this back to you on September the 23rd. And if Legend Lit doesn't meet, we will have first reading back for you on September the 23rd.
Who's on the Legend Lit?
I believe Councilmember Parley, Councilmember Sullivan, and...
Councilmember Smith?
Eh,
Councilmember Smith?
And who? Oh, okay. I would defer, you wanted to speak again?
No, I don't
I would
see that.
welcome that in my committee.
Okay. And wait, let me hear that guarantee one more time.
You have my word as the city attorney that first reading will be back at not your next meeting, which is, it'll be back by September the 23rd, regardless of whether Legend Lit meets or not.
Great, I will include that in my referral to the Legend Lit. And with that, I will motion to receive and file?
Actually receive with the
Receive.
direction that staff is to work on the proposed ordinance and come back with first reading after going to Legend Lit using the BUBH guidelines and no permits and as least restrictions as possible.
Thank you, as stated.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. And now, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Parlier? Councilmember Rivera?
Aye.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilmember Weir?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Freeman?
No.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Motion is approved with Councilmember Parlier absent and Councilmembers Weir and Freeman voting no.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney and City Clerk. Sorry. And the next item, please.
Quarterly update from the Bakersfield-Kern Regional Homeless Collaborative on homeless system performance metrics.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg, and thank you all for participating. Mr. Clegg.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and City Council, given the time constraints that we were observing with having a good, robust discussion on our prior topic, we have arranged with our regional homeless collaborative partners to come back on our September 9th meeting to provide that update.
Thank you very much. And now, next item, please.
Closed session. Item A, conference with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6.
Thank you. Okay, we'll convene into closed session. For those of you who are in the lobby, we are just going into closed session, and so I see a number of you in the lobby. We will be starting the meeting on the later side, so depending how quickly we can get through this, but we will not start at 5:15. We'll try to keep you posted.